Good evening. My name is Linda Williams, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of the Ann Arbor area. I welcome you to our Zoom forum featuring candidates for the Ann Arbor District Library Board. The candidates will be on the ballot in the general election on Tuesday, November 3rd. This year, the League of Women Voters is celebrating 100 years of expanding voter rights, educating voters, and shaping and influencing legislation at local, state, and national levels. We are pleased to sponsor these forums. The League is a nonpartisan civic organization that encourages informed and active participation by all citizens in government. While the League does not support candidates or parties, we do take stands on issues we have studied. One of the League's most important goals is to assist voters in making informed choices at the polls, and thus we bring you tonight's forum. Our moderator this evening is Susan Lackey, who will explain the format and get us started. Susan?
Thanks, Linda. It's my honor now to introduce the 5 candidates for the Ann Arbor District Library Board of Trustees. Rich Foley, Molly Kleinman, Onna Solomon, Scott Trudeau, and Jamie VanderBroek. Thank you, candidates, for participating in this forum. Our forum today will have the following format. Each candidate will have an opening statement of up to 1 minute and a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. In between, I'll ask a series of questions that have come from the Ann Arbor community, and each of the 5 candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. At appropriate times, they'll receive a signal from the timer at 30 seconds, and then again at the end of their 2 minutes with stop. At that time, finish your thought, finish your sentence, and after that, our Zoom team, which is always kind of in the background and doesn't get the thanks they deserve, we'll mute you so we can move on to the next question and the next candidates. The candidates will begin speaking in alphabetical order, and depending on the number of questions we're able to get to, all candidates should have an opportunity to be both first and last to answer a question. We're ready now for your opening statement, Mr. Foley.
All right, well, thank you. And I wanted to thank everyone. Thank you to the League, and thank you to the Zoom team who is supporting us as well. But I feel very honored to be speaking with you all about one of the things that in my life has always been a passion, that being the public library. Whether it was here in Ann Arbor, as I was, both a student here as well as a business owner and pretty much a very long time resident, I found the library to be a great pillar of the community. And I think the opportunity for me to run for this is because I feel like I have some value to add to the library. My background is a mix of business. I've run both large and small organizations, startup organizations, as well as a very large educational publisher. That being said, I'm now working locally here for Xanadu, which is a Ann Arbor-based custom publishing operation, and I feel like I'm in a situation where I can now give back to the library. The library has really shaped me, and hopefully I will be able to add value. As a board member.
Thank you, Mr. Foley. Ms. Kleinman, your opening statement, please.
Thank you, and thank you. Yes, thank you to all of you for organizing this and for having us. My name is Molly Kleinman. I'm running for library board because our public library is one of the few places in our community that is truly for everyone, regardless of citizenship, housing status, language, race, gender, or religion. I see serving as a library trustee as an opportunity to support an essential civic institution. A bit about my background: I have a master's degree in information science and a PhD in higher education policy. And I currently work as a program manager at the Ford School of Public Policy. I have experience working in trade publishing as an academic librarian and in educational technology. My service experience includes being an inaugural board member for Common Cycle, a local bicycle nonprofit, volunteering with a local immigrant rights group, and I'm currently the chair of the Ann Arbor Transportation Commission. I believe that my training and my experience would position me well to serve the AADL successfully. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
Hi, my name's Onna Solomon, and I thank you all for being here, all the candidates and the League of Women Voters. I'm a social worker and a therapist, and I own my own business downtown. And I also have extensive experience with strategic planning and financial planning for both private business and public institutions. I'm also a longtime Ann Arborite, a mother of two, and a library superfan, which really is the heart of why I am running for the board, because I just have the deepest love and appreciation for the excellence of the library as a mother, as a business owner, as a writer, as a citizen. And I really hope to be able to give back to an institution that I just hold very dear to my heart. Thank you.
Susan, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Solomon. May we have your opening statement, Mr. Trudeau.
Hi, thanks. I'm Scott Trudeau. Thanks to the League and the Zoom team for this opportunity, and thank you to the League for all of the work you do to protect and improve our democracy, especially now. I live on North Main Street with my wife, our 7-year-old daughter, and a rescue terrier, and we're all huge fans of the library. The downtown branch is our neighborhood branch. Professionally, I've worked for a variety of nonprofits and digital publishers as a technologist, a software engineer, and a manager. I've also served on the Ann Arbor City Planning Commission and Transportation Commission, all of which are experience I think will lend themselves well to serving as a trustee. I look forward to our discussion tonight and a chance to serve the district as a trustee, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Trudeau. And now, Ms. VanderBroek, your opening statement, please.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for all you did to put together this evening. My name is Jamie VanderBroek, and I am both a librarian at the University of Michigan, and I am currently a member of the Board of Trustees of the Ann Arbor District Library. I was appointed in 2015, then I ran for election in 2016, and in the time since I was elected in 2016, I also served as the board's president for 2 years. Because I am professionally a librarian, and I worked at the Ann Arbor District Library for 3 years when I first moved to Ann Arbor in 2005, I feel professionally qualified to tell you that we have an incredible public library, and I am very eager to continue serving on the board.
Thank you. Ms. VanderBroek, thank you very much. And now we will move on to the questions. As a reminder, I will read each question once unless you ask me to repeat it. And we will start with Ms. Kleinman, excuse me, for the first question. And this first question is, do you hold an Ann Arbor Library card, and how do you personally use the library? Ms. Kleinman.
This is a wonderful and fun question. Yes, I do hold an Ann Arbor District Library card. And I use it in a lot of different ways. Most of what I use it for is borrowing books that I read on my phone. I read ebooks. I love the extensive collection of ebooks that we have. But I also use the library to entertain my children, to get books for my kids and videos for my kids. More recently, the library has started making some of its meeting rooms available for anyone to book and use in a really lightweight way. And so I've used some of the spaces for events that I've helped organize in one of the nonprofits that I'm involved in. And then I've also just used it as a place to go. There have been times when there's been a blackout in my neighborhood, and I've gone to the library to have Wi-Fi and light and heat. And I know that there are many, many more ways that others use the library as well, but those are I think the big ones for me. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Kleinman. Ms. Solomon.
Yes, I definitely have a library card and I use it a lot. Wow, okay, well, I mean, I check out lots and lots of books for my children. If people don't know about Stories to Go, they should check it out. They have bags of books with different themes that you can pick up in a tote bag that are amazing. I use the local music, what's it called? The local music database that is compiled through the library website. I use their free access to the Oxford English Dictionary. I get so many books out for my practice. They have an incredible section of therapy books that I use. I create lists for my clients. I work with children with disabilities, and so I curate lists for them on the library site for kids with anxiety or kids with autism spectrum disorder. I've rented large yard games. Oh, and I play the summer games every year, and my kids play the summer games every year. And I'm really excited to get my Ann Arbor Library lunchbox soon that I ordered with my points. Oh, geez. That's enough. I use it for so many different things, and you can tell that I get really, really excited about it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Solomon. Mr. Trudeau.
Yes, I do have a card, and similarly, I use it quite a bit. I also have a young child, so we go to the library, or had been until recently, gone to the library all the time, just as a waypoint in our day to keep our kid busy, to like look at books, play with the toys, check some things out, return some things. I use it personally to do things like research travel and research topics that I'm interested in. I'm also a big fan of the tool library. I've taken out a boroscope to inspect what's going on behind the walls of my old house. And I find myself there in normal times, again, all the time for events, including many hosted by the League. And as an engaged community member, having that space to gather is super valuable. I'm also a big fan of a lot of the digital tools. One of my favorite hobbies is logging into the old news archive on the website and browsing through old news articles on whatever topic comes to mind during the day. And I always learn interesting little tidbits of local history that way.
Okay, thank you. Ms. VanderBroek.
Well, I have a lot in common with Scott, Molly, and Anna. I use the library all the time. Before the shutdown, Westgate was like a living room for my family. I would also go there if we couldn't be at our house for some reason, but it was also just amazing to have this place in the town that we could stop into for free without any expectation that we would purchase anything, and spend as much time as we wanted to spend and feel super comfortable as if we owned it, because we do. I think that's just the coolest thing. I'm also really excited about the shelf service that's rolling out. This is this new thing that AADL is just starting, where you can tell the librarians what you want, and they will make you a grocery size bag full of books that you can take home. I think that's especially helpful during the pandemic for people who are trying to pick out picture books for kids. And so I will definitely do that for my daughter. And I use old news a lot for work, actually, because I'm often asked questions that are related to Ann Arbor. And I think people probably don't realize that the Ann Arbor District Library invests so much in local history and preserving and digitizing and making it available. And that they were the ones to rescue the Ann Arbor News's history so that we as a community could have it for free to keep forever. So those are most of the ways that I use it. And I used to check out cookbooks and interiors books when we could browse the shelves, and I look forward to doing that again.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley.
Well, hello. Yes, I do have a Ann Arbor District Library card, and I use it a little bit differently than perhaps the other candidates, because I use it particularly for my own business that I've set up from the standpoint of, I use many of the databases. I feel like the business resources that they have at this library are incredible. And many times, some of my other entrepreneurial friends, I find them spending money on the web for things that are readily available within our public library. So I do think that's a real opportunity for us to continue to create and enhance the awareness of what is in those confines of the public library, but not only the confines of the public library, that confine reaches out to each and every one of our, whether it's offices and or living rooms. I had been using the meeting rooms because sometimes I get tired of working from home. Now it's less of a choice than I used to have, but I would utilize the meeting rooms as well. So I very much find the library for my personal use to be much more digital from my perspective. It's also nice that I can access digitally even when I travel. I'm still able to access my library. And that and the meeting rooms are primarily the way I've used it, but it is still such a, sometimes I walk to the downtown library blocks away just to get away. And as I said, get out of my own office to a new space. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Solomon, the next question is yours to begin with. What is the most important issue behind your decision to run for the library board in 2020? And can you please be specific about that?
So I suppose the most specific I can be about an issue is really the specificity of the vision that the library has put out, because my goal as a board member is to continue to steward that vision. I really strongly believe in what the library laid out about being flexible and adaptable and creative in responding to the world. It's actually really interesting to me. They put that out before the pandemic, but if you read it now, it really resonates that instead of laying out specific programs and organizational plans, they're talking about adapting and creating answers to the questions that arise as they come. And so I really believe that with the right group of people on the board, we can continue to help the excellence of the library and that specific vision of continuing an institution that is really serving the public in a unique way by making public ownership and access to really essential knowledge and information and tools. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Solomon. Mr. Trudeau.
I have a lot of reasons I would love to serve, but I think if I had to pick one specific concern and area where I think I really care to contribute is around planning for the future of the downtown branch. As I mentioned, that's my neighborhood branch. It is long been in need of updates to serve the changing needs of the community. I think there are a lot of ways we can accomplish that, and I don't have a prescription for that because I don't think we know what the answer to that question is. The library has been doing a lot of planning and research and preparation for what the various opportunities are and weighing those trade-offs. And with my experience on Planning Commission, understanding how the development process works, and just a very regular user of the space of the downtown library and recognizing how well we've used the limits of the space and really seeing the potential of where it could go in the future. I really hope that I can contribute to that conversation about making the plan for the future once we settle what those opportunities are.
Okay, Mr. Trudeau, thank you. Ms. VanderBroek.
I think the most important issue for me is the composition of the team that sits around the board table or on the Zoom call in the present age. I think that I have seen in my experience on the board that the people in the room have a large impact on the activity and the future of the library. So I think that having people who ask good questions and effectively steward the resources of the library is almost more important than any other specific single issue that we could have opinions on. Just to give you an example, while I was on the board, the library rolled out Fifth Avenue Press, which is their own content creation firm. They allow local people to get their work out into the world. So authors and illustrators can create anything from children's books to novels. And the library is actually the creator, like the publisher of these things. And now during the pandemic, you can see that that kind of creative forward thinking serves them so well to increase their creativity when it comes to thinking about what a library can and should do and what it should be. So I think that if you have a board that supports like this incredible staff and their creativity and their innovation and the ideas that they have, and almost gets out of the way of the staff, I think that that's so important in order to kind of keep the library going in the direction that it's going, which I think is a really good one.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley.
Probably the single biggest reason for me or issue for me to throw my hat in the ring and run to be a trustee would be around the idea of what is upcoming and the challenges that face the library post-COVID, whenever post-COVID, hopefully as soon as possible when post-COVID comes. In the future, we're not gonna, library budgets are not gonna expand. They're likely, based because of tax receipts and the various ways that we are funded, we may have to do more with less. Because of my knowledge of the inner workings of the vendor side of publishing and libraries in general, I think I'd be valuable as a guide, as someone to help guide and inform and advise. I agree that being a board of such a well-run library, it's important to stay out of the way of your librarian and of the director and of the squad. So more than anything else, I feel that I have very good business instincts. I have a strong ability to work with our vendors going forward to help us do more with potentially less funding. Thank you.
Thank you. And Ms. Kleinman.
Yeah, so one of the threads that's really gone through all of the professional work that I've done for most of my adult life has been around improving access to information, and in particular in democratizing access to information. And the Ann Arbor District Library does that as well as anyone. It's a truly excellent library, and like others have said, my goal really is to help it maintain that excellence. But in terms of a specific issue, this idea of improving access to information and access to knowledge, increasingly that means improving access to digital resources and electronic resources. And this is a problem that is happening industry-wide, that there's a real tension between the desires of the public, the needs of the libraries, and the desires or goals of the companies that are licensing content. And that's something that I think about a lot, partly because, as I said before, I'm an ebook reader. I read most of my books electronically, and if the library can't get them, or if they can only get one copy that one person can borrow at a time, I spend a lot of time waiting 6 months or more for the book that I want to read. So there's that sort of personal piece of it, but it is also much bigger, especially when we think about the world we're living in right now with the pandemic. The library has had to deliver a tremendous amount of information and content electronically, and they've done a wonderful job at that. And I want to help them continue to push those boundaries and to innovate in new ways to get information and knowledge out into the world and into our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Kleinman. The next question goes to Mr. Trudeau, and it's a fairly lengthy one, so I apologize, but I didn't know how else to get it all out there. The library's 2020 strategic plan calls for the library to maintain a strong downtown presence while not taking a position on whether that involves remodeling the current building or constructing a new or largely new facility. This is a three-part question. Do you agree that with the library's extensive branch system, the downtown presence remains important to the library? how should the library engage the larger community in determining what that presence should look like? And what is your personal preference? Mr. Trudeau.
Thank you. This is one I've thought a lot about. The downtown branch is my neighborhood branch. It's the branch I spend the most time in. It's the closest one to my house and to the 7,000 downtown residents and the many thousands who live just outside of the downtown like myself. So it's also across the street from the largest transit center in the county. So yes, absolutely, I think the downtown presence is important. It's essential. The neighborhood branches, which I've also spent plenty of time in, are fantastic facilities. But yeah, I would first say definitely downtown is important. How should we engage the larger community? I mean, there are a lot of options and a lot of trade-offs. We could raise a bond and go to the voters for more money. We've had a huge school millage and other reaches for more tax dollars, so that may or may not be viable, and we should research with the community to see whether there's an appetite for that. And there's a lot of value above the downtown branch. So if we reconstructed the building, there's plenty of space that could be built out that the library wouldn't need. So the library, as they've looked into, could potentially find a development partner to build affordable housing, office space, or some other use above the library space that would then leverage that value, so we can get a new branch without having to raise additional money. Or, as you mentioned, we could renovate and maintain the existing library. I don't think there's an obvious perfect answer, especially now, given the conditions of the pandemic and the uncertainty about future tax revenue and everything else. If I had to choose, like I think using that space above the library seems like an excellent amount of value to unlock to bring broader value to the community. But I think really carefully weighing those options and engaging the community about what those trade-offs are will be essential before we make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. VanderBroek.
Okay, I think that I wrote down what you asked, so let me give it a try. I think downtown is hugely important, and it was clearly important to the board in the last few years. We've engaged in a multi-step process to determine the state of the current facility, what it would take to maintain it, what our options are. And then right before the pandemic, we also created, in consultation with an outside group, a document that explores some of the possible options that Scott actually just outlined. You know, how could we kind of answer the question of how the downtown should exist in the future? In terms of how we engage the community, I think the library does that every day. That is the library's business, to engage the community. So I think that probably most people think about like having focus groups or things like that when you think about learning from the community. But the people who run our library are, they spend their lives fully invested in the community in which they're operating. And a huge percentage of people in our community are active card holders. So they're demonstrating how they want to use the library all the time. And before the pandemic, you could see that in their use of the downtown library, the way that they would pack in for sushi demonstrations or author readings into the lobbytorium. And I think the answer to what to do about the downtown library, it's so contextual. And I think it just comes down to the fact that the library, it's for sharing. It's for sharing by this community, and it needs to be what this community hopes and expects and wants it to be now and in 50 years. So the answer to that question is going to depend on a lot of factors. And I think as we sort of move through and out of the pandemic, a lot of scenarios will probably change in a way that I think it's hard to say something now that would be definitive. But we've already done a lot of research, and when it's time to return to thinking about the future of the downtown library, I think we'll have that to build on, plus our constant engagement with the community.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley.
Yes, I think the downtown library, from the standpoint of, is it important to the community? I think it is, you know, absolutely essential to our community and to the library system going forward. We from my perspective also, looking at how we could best use the building or what we need to do with the facility, I think it's way premature to ask because we don't know what the library of the future is going to be. Actually, pre-pandemic, I probably was much more focused on what I thought the next 10 years, 20 years may bring for a public library. But I think due to the nature of the pandemic and due to the way it has fundamentally changed the way we as a society operate, I don't know what our building should look like. Should it be twice as big? Should it be half as big? Neither one of those questions is something at this point I can answer. But as we speak to what the library's mission is around flexibility and the ability to adapt, I think we as a library board, as a community, need to be able to adapt to whatever the next phase of this community and how the library is able to serve it does present itself. So I do think we engage the community in such a manner that I feel very comfortable that the people of Ann Arbor are not soft-spoken. They will let us know where we should go, what we should do as a library board, and we just need to make sure we listen. My personal preference, I've told you, I want to stay as flexible and as nimble as this big of an organization possibly could to really meet the upcoming unknown needs of the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kleinman.
So like my fellow candidates, I absolutely agree that the downtown building is really the linchpin for a lot of the operations of the library. And I absolutely believe that in whatever future we have coming, we will need a downtown library. We will need a really, a center, both for the city, this sort of publicly owned place that is for everyone, but then also for the library as a system. I've spent a lot of time in a lot of the branch libraries, but I've also spent a lot of time in the downtown library, and it's so important. In terms of engaging the community, I agree that the library is equipped to hear from the community every day. I also have seen the way the community lets the library know what it thinks about things in public comment at board meetings and written feedback. Yeah, and Arborites are not shy. I think there will be ways to engage the community with intention once we get to a point where we know what questions to ask. But while we're in this current state with the pandemic, I don't think we know what questions to ask about what the future of our downtown space should be. So in terms of my own preference, we need a downtown library. I want it to be vibrant. I want it to have all of the elements that it would need to do the kinds of things we want our library to do now. This includes really big events. It includes really, really niche workshops. It does still include physical materials. I forgot the science kits in my list of things we use the library for. This whole floor of saber-toothed tiger skulls and telescopes and microscopes. Those make sense at a downtown library too. So that's what I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Solomon.
So yeah, I'm in agreement with everybody else that the downtown library is absolutely essential. I think that it's truly a community center. The numbers of people, you know, pre-pandemic, of course, who came through, we had events with thousands of people showing up for the comic event and for the craft shows. And I mean, the turnout for literary events there is astonishing. And I really believe that it could be even greater with a greater facility. I think those examples of how many people are using the downtown library as a community center, as a meeting place, is a way of engagement. And, you know, going last, I can kind of say, I agree that maybe it'll be a bond, maybe it'll be a reconstruction, maybe it'll be a renovation. In the strange times that we're in, it's really hard to know. But I will say that I adamantly, very strongly believe that we will get through this pandemic and all of our library branches will be filled with wonderful people and wonderful programming again in the future. And I really want to plan for a downtown library that can meet the current needs and create a structure that foresees the future needs and really provides an even more robust space than we already have. I see it as a potential to create something incredible in the downtown to help be, you know, a pillar of the downtown community. Thanks.
Thank you. Next question will begin with Ms. VanderBroek. Since 2010, the library's budget has increased by 25% and the number of card holders by 48%. The library budget remains supported mainly by property taxes in the form of perpetual millage, revenue from which has risen steadily over that time. Many municipal finance experts believe that the current economic turndown may be longer and deeper than that of 2008-2009. As a library board member, where would your priorities lie should the current economic downturn force deep budget cuts?
Well, first of all, I feel really lucky to have the staff that we do as we sort of face the future because they came through the 2008 recession. They learned a lot through that experience. They preserved everyone's job. They preserved the services that they offered, the physical locations. In fact, like they had just opened a branch at the start of that time period. So I think that I feel comforted that we have a group of people who have been through an experience of both increasing revenue and then a sharp decrease and a difficult period, and that they have learned things that they can apply in the future. I think that, first of all, the library is made up of people. It's people who run the circulation desks and put the books on the shelves and decide which things to have, and people who engage with our community. So I think they're the number one most important priority from my perspective. But I also think that there are so many ways that the library already is very creative and innovative when it comes to addressing the needs of the community in terms of offering programs or services that could simply be amplified without a ton of impact to what's offered to the community. So you can see that the library, I think we're almost spoiled by the services that we receive from the library in terms of like the programs that they offer. But I think that because you have a really creative team of people, they could easily, not easily, but I think that they could certainly, I'm very confident, offer incredible programs with fewer resources. I mean, look at the way that they have managed during the pandemic. All of a sudden they have no physical location, and yet they're still an everyday part of our lives.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley. Mr. Foley, you need to...
Sorry about that. I had a momentary video problem. I have a pretty unique perspective on this particular thing. I lived through the 2008-2009 downturn from a library's perspective on the other side, as running the academic and public library division of Gale Research, which is one of a primary library vendor. I actually experienced working with the libraries to figure out how to reduce the amount, their cost, their spend with us, but at the same time, help them to keep the same level of service. So one of the things I think I would, and which I did, we worked with the entire state of Massachusetts to, while, you know, we didn't want to lose them as a customer as Gale, they didn't want to lose our resources. We were able to put together a plan to stay together. So one of the things with a major budget cut I would look at is how do we go to our vendors and look at, hey, this is going to be painful for both of us. Is there a way for all of us to win in this situation, or at least lose less? So when we're talking about specifically databases and things like that, there is some room for negotiation. And you know what? In that example I gave with the state of Massachusetts, we rode that, we worked with them in the downtime. And then as things picked up, we were rewarded as an organization, as a private organization. We got more and more of their business because we trusted and we worked together in the tough times. And so one of the things I would do is leverage my relationships, knowledge of the vendor and the supplier industry to see if there wouldn't be some way to work in cooperation to help alleviate some of those tough budget cuts to allow us to hold on to the people that really do make this library great. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Kleinman?
During the 2008-2009 downturn, I was working as the special assistant to the Dean of Libraries at the University of Michigan Library System. The dean at the time was Paul Courant, who had previously served as provost during a previous economic downturn at the University of Michigan. And I had the real privilege to learn about the approach to a budget and to a budget crisis that he took as a leader. And the first lesson was to trust your people. So Jamie talked about how the AADL has an incredible staff. And the question that Paul asked every manager was, what do you want to do? And what do you want to stop doing to make it happen? And he let the managers really make those decisions and base that on their experience with their areas and trust the expertise of the people who were closer to the users, closer to the needs of the library. I believe that that is the approach that we should take with the AADL in the situation. Paul was really adamant that it was important to keep adapting and keep innovating, even at a time of reduced resources. And the way to do that was to let your managers, let your staff figure out what the priorities were and figure out how to change. And I believe that that's what we would have to do for the AADL. I am not the person to say what we should cut and what we should keep. It's the staff who know the library, who know the users, who will best be able to make those recommendations. And I believe it's the board's job to do what they can to support the staff, because the staff truly are the most valuable asset that the library has. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Solomon?
So, a couple of things. One is I would always go back to the vision of the sustainability and adaptability. And I think the library is doing such a wonderful job and did such a wonderful job in times of plenty to continue sustainability. So building in structures that can compress or expand as needed. The second piece is there's the people in the organization who, I just can't even believe the brilliance and creativity of the staff. And so we want to trust those people, as others have said. But for me, with my particular background in social work, the other priority for me would be to make sure that essential services for all users of the library remain intact. So, of course, we want to look at the most used services, but we also need to look at the most important services to our most vulnerable populations. And so that would be a huge priority for me, is to think about citizens with disabilities, citizens who English is not their first language, citizens who are marginalized in various ways, and the ways those people have been engaged by the library, and to make sure that those essential services stay as part of the core services of the library, even in lean times.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Trudeau?
I'm largely going to echo what has been said before. I think we are absolutely fortunate to have an incredible staff and leadership in the library, and we need to trust them to guide these decisions. And just as an example of that, we entered this pandemic with a $10 million fund balance due to the prudent fiscal management that has already, been in place in the leadership of the library. So I think we're already in a strong position where we're not panicking, even though our context is unprecedented and the floor has dropped from below us, but the library still has some breathing space to continue to deliver on its mission and carefully plan for the future, even given the uncertainty. And I think this kind of thinking showed up in the strategic plan that was referenced before in the director's letter, highlighting that in February. So this was before the pandemic really hit. Recognizing that we're entering into uncertain times and we need to remain adaptable. And the library, I think, has done an excellent job of doing that. It showed us what they can do when things change dramatically. And so I'm looking forward to supporting the library staff and leadership and continuing to do that. And I also would like to really echo Ms. Solomon's point of not looking at just what's used by the most people or used the most often, but looking at who the users are and making sure a wide array of populations are being considered as we make those decisions. And I trust our staff at the library to do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley, the next question goes to you. COVID-19 has forced the Ann Arbor District Library, like all of us, to adapt on the fly to continue to serve its constituents. What initiatives coming out of the library over the last 6 months are you particularly impressed with, and what, if any, do you believe will remain a part of the library's offerings in a post-COVID environment?
One that comes to mind is the idea that we were able to, without going to an outside vendor, but utilizing our internal IT resources, create a way to reserve reserve books and resources to then be delivered to cars that drive up. I know there were several apps that came on the market in the library space, but quite frankly, the Ann Arbor District Library had already created their own. So talk about innovation, talk about using resources, and talk about really meeting a need due to COVID. When people weren't allowed to come in, how do you reserve time? None of this, reserve time and parking spots and everything else, none of that was thought through, obviously, before COVID, but it certainly became an important part of the way we served the community, the AADL served the community going forward. So in terms of an example of innovation, I think that one was quite extraordinary, and I very much enjoyed the way it was faster than the for-profit area in the way that they were able to be innovative. So hopefully we get beyond this pandemic, and I don't know that this will always be needed in its current state, but still quite an innovation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kleinman.
I feel it's such an amazing list. I think the fact that it's such an amazing list speaks volumes to how amazing and creative our librarians and our library has been, all of the library staff. There have been a lot of adaptations that have really impressed me. The Bummer Game is at the top of my list because, so there's this summer game, it's widely beloved. It's a thing that happens largely in person and in library spaces. And in 3 days, from the time the library shut down, they were launching the Bummer Game, which just, the humor there was something I really needed in that moment in March. Even though I didn't end up really playing the Bummer Game that much because, everything, but I was really moved by that creativity and the speed with which they got that out the door with this logo, and it was incredible. Some of the other services that have come out since, the library is continuing to roll out more services for people during the pandemic. One that's coming up that I think is so cool is Zoom rooms. So I've used the library to book meeting rooms. They're making their Zoom account available so that people who don't have a Zoom account, people who don't have access to an institutional account or can't afford it, can use the library's Zoom rooms the same way that we could use their physical rooms. I think that's brilliant. I also love that this goes back to something that Onna was talking about earlier. they really prioritized the services for people without internet access, with people who were really vulnerable. So they rolled out very quickly a phone-based service so that people who don't have internet can still call the library and get the kind of help that they might have had walking in the past. And they started doing printing, because a lot of people used to rely on the library for printing. And that's another piece where I really thought you could really see that emphasis on the needs of the library's more vulnerable users, the people who aren't being well served elsewhere. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
Yeah, so many amazing initiatives and services. One that I think is fantastic and I hope continues on is the free access to the New York Times. But the thing that comes to mind for me that just really represents the ways that the library just goes beyond just the first step of making sure people get access to materials is the Black Lives Matters initiative and the way that it intersected with COVID. So these online online book clubs that were highlighting Black Lives Matters or anti-Black racism. And hundreds of people are participating in these online book clubs. So not only are we helping for people to connect meaningfully with each other online when they can't meet in person in real life, we're also providing this incredible opportunity for conversations, for our community to have these very difficult conversations in thoughtful, safe ways. So I feel like that initiative really brought everything together for me. And I think that that kind of initiative is going to, I mean, it represents what the library does best in its programming anyway, but I think the combination of social justice and online community building is very unique to our time, and yet will also continue forward after this pandemic is over.
Thank you, Mr. Trudeau.
A lot of my things on my list are very similar to what's already been said. The quick turnaround of the bummer game and that little bit of levity right at the moment when like we were just realizing how bad the pandemic was going to be was just like a little gift from the library, and just really showed how quickly they can adapt and how well they are, can serve the community beyond just like basic services, but really giving us something more. The Zoom rooms, the NY Times subscription has been great. One other thing that has become a fixture of our household is tuning into AADL TV. So for crafting shows and discussions and other things. So it's been nice to have that ability to kind of still attend an event, even though it's not in the physical space, and really just having that ready to go and getting it up and running already, again, just shows the groundwork that has been laid with the staff and with the kinds of pieces the library's already put together. So, and then the last thing was just seeing how quickly they reconfigured the lobby at the downtown branch yet again for picking up reservations with the video camera and the doors wide open, so it was safe. Was a relief when I could finally go pick up books again. And all of those things I think have just really demonstrated how great our staff is at solving these kinds of problems.
Okay, thank you. Ms. VanderBroek.
So I touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think that what's remarkable to me about the pandemic is how it allowed the decisions that the library had made before to really shine. So they've long invested in digital infrastructure, and not just purchasing things, but making things and making things that are unique to this community. So the summer game has long been an example of that. And like the others have said, the moment that everything shut down, the library was able to instantly become a fully digital library with not just offering content, but also like programming and sort of exciting and unique creative touches on top of the like what you might ordinarily expect. And I also think another thing that probably most people don't know is that anyone who works at the library is welcome and encouraged to propose a program. So I think in a lot of traditional setups, this is something that's limited to certain staff. But this has really grown the strength of the staff and their ability to think about a program from the beginning all the way through offering it. And you can see in AADL TV, so many people, my daughter spent, I think she watched 3 times the, this like, this particular program where a librarian or a staff member explained how she had set up like a kind of a world in a video game. So that's been played a lot during the pandemic. So like there's so much variety and breadth and depth of that content. There's story time for all ages. There's story time in all different languages. And that's all offered by people who previously would have done that work, but also people who worked in the safety department or people who were shelving books previously. And I just think those 2 investments really demonstrate the decision making that the library has been committed to.
Okay, thank you. This will be our final question, and we'll begin with Ms. Kleinman. In the big picture, what do you see as the role of a library in the 21st century?
Okay, that is big. That is a big question. The role, you know, I think I've touched on some of this already, but I believe that the role of the library, a public library in the 21st century is to serve all members of the community, to act as both a physical space, digital space, and emotional space, to provide a really wide range of resources. There are limits. I don't think librarians should also have to be social workers or EMTs. That is often a situation that is happening in our public libraries. There are limits. Librarians and library staff have certain expertise, but it's a lot broader than I think most people think about. It's not about alphabetization, and it's not all about like shelving books and reading all day. It's about this broader need for resources, knowledge resources, information resources, technical resources. And that I think is a role that the public libraries that are surviving and thriving right now are figuring out how to do that in various ways. And it's going to vary by community and the needs of different communities. But I think that's the common thread, is that libraries have this really unique ability to be for everyone and to meet different users in different needs in different ways. And that's really what I see as the role of big public libraries in general, big picture.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
Yeah, it's a big question. So I think at base, the role of the public library is to serve the community so that there is that public ownership and public access to knowledge, to tools, to information, and to community building and community services. And what that will look like will be both a physical community, whether that is during these times online or in person. And also, I think a huge role of the library will be to be a curator of our digital experiences. So the internet is such an overwhelming tool for us. And I think libraries can really serve to provide an experience for our citizens to be secure that the information that they're getting when they go through the library website, the library databases, is accurate and up to date. And I also think that another piece of the library is for everybody to see themselves represented in the knowledge base that we create in our public libraries. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Trudeau.
In the 21st century, I think libraries are more relevant than ever as we are swimming in an ocean of information that is out there. And even more so, I think the library as a guide, using our librarians, using their ability to curate, using their ability to create programming with an eye to who we are serving is an essential piece of of our community, and that's the role they'll continue to play. Another role that libraries will continue to play, and I think our library also does very well, is specifically focusing on locally relevant information that isn't out there on the internet or isn't available from a vendor. It's something that only exists here and is only relevant to people here. And that includes things like the Old News Archive and other archives that the library is keeping, and developing the local publishing operation for people who are creating new books and new information to help people in our community share with the broader world. So I think there's if anything, the role for the library has grown even larger. And fundamentally, library is about sharing. So sharing together as a community is a way of sharing information as well. And so continuing to do an excellent job of fostering those community interactions in the physical and virtual spaces. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. VanderBroek.
So if you ask someone to tell you what they know about libraries or what comes to their mind when they think about libraries, I think they will almost certainly say books, or maybe they'll say reading or literacy. But like Scott just said, like I fundamentally believe that libraries are about sharing. They're about coming together to share what a community finds important. And so I think in this way, libraries are a key institution of the 21st century. I think they demonstrate humility, something that's incredibly rare in this current moment, because they're shaped by their communities. They're mirrors to the places where they are, and they're for you. They're for you right now. They're for you next year. They're for you as you go through your life, all stages of your life. They're for children. And they're for all people. So it doesn't matter how you come to the library, whether you come to it at all physically, or if you visit it only digitally. The library is for every person in this community. And I think that's such a rare and special civic organization that deserves to be protected. And I think increasingly people recognize that. I mentioned before, a huge percentage of the community are not just card holders, but active card holders. And when we do surveys of the community about their perceptions of the library, the community super highly values the library and has a very high approval rating of the institution.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Foley.
The library of the 21st century, I think, is, as everyone has said, is even more relevant. I think there are certain aspects of it that are going to become more critical as we move through this COVID and into our next stage. Programming is going to be absolutely key. Who would have thought about the growth of homeschooling and the need to leverage library resources for homeschooling? Then there's the same from a remote standpoint. Now there's more distance learning. Everything is happening. Quite frankly, this school, K-12, is having a terrible, as is higher education, a terrible time with distance learning. So where does the library fit in to supplement? To answer that question, I have no idea, but I am certain that the very smart people at the library will evaluate and figure out how we help to supplement and, fill in the cracks. because that's in so many instances, especially post-pandemic, there will be new needs that we don't even know about in the 21st century, for the 21st century library. And libraries historically have been great about picking up the pieces, really keeping the community together, being the glue that holds things together. And I think in this instance, this is exactly the type of role the library will play going forward. I think Director Parker and her team, as well as, you know, hopefully myself on the board, but this board in general is a highly functioning board. It's a highly functioning organization overall. And I think it's in as good a hands as any in the entire country from a public library perspective. So I think it's exciting, you know, what is going to happen in the 21st century post-pandemic.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move now to our closing statements, and we will begin with Ms. VanderBroek and go in reverse alphabetical order.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to what we've said this evening. I have experience as a librarian, and I have experience as a board member, and I've also led the board. One of the most key things I think that I accomplished while I was leading the board is the transition to hosting our meetings online. So not the way that we do now for the pandemic, but you have been able to watch the AADL board meetings for several years now, and that's something that was accomplished while I was president of the board. I really believe in this fundamental civic institution and its importance to our community, and I'm very committed to the work that I have been doing, and I would very much like to continue in my service on the board.
Thank you. Mr. Trudeau.
So I once heard somebody ask, imagine if public libraries didn't exist and you tried to start one today. It's like you'd have a building full of books and information and well-trained subject matter experts that could help people guide it, and tools and resources and musical instruments and hold events, and it's all free. It would just be a radical idea. It's hard to imagine like how you would even get that off the ground, but we have that, and it's just I think libraries are just such a radical institution that make our society as a whole so much greater. So I'm a big fan of libraries. I'm especially a big fan of our library, who I think really do an excellent job. We have so much deep community support. So many active, engaged members of our community really love and value the library, with excellent leadership and a phenomenal staff. So that's all to say we've got something really special that I'm hoping I'll be able to bring my experience managing teams, working with digital technologies and publishing, multi-million-dollar budgets, and also just a big fan of the fundamental mission of the library, to continue that record of excellence for the community, keeping the library adaptable, supporting the staff's very creative and innovative efforts to create these tools that we can use to keep the library going. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon.
So thank you again so much for this opportunity to talk about our enthusiasm for this amazing institution. And I hope it's okay to mention in my closing comments that one of the joys of running for this position has been running along the slate that I'm in with Jamie and Molly and Scott. I've already learned so much from all of them about how to think about engaging with the library, and whoever ends up on the board, I've been watching the board meetings just thinking, oh, this is so interesting. I really hope that I get to talk about this with everybody. Between the Mallett's Creek generator and the Black Lives Matter initiatives and all of these things, it's just, I never imagined before I started getting interested in this position that I would find all of this so fascinating. But again, just going back to the vision of the library, all of it is serving it. I mean, if you haven't listened to the generator conversation of the last board meeting, I highly recommend it. it was so interesting because it wasn't about a generator. It was about being a community center for people in the neighborhood and about the meaning of that generator for the citizens that live near Mallett's Creek. So anyway, I really hope that I get to serve for the library because it's a real passion of mine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kleinman.
Yeah, so I also just want to thank all of you at the League of Women Voters for organizing this for us, and all of my fellow candidates for being here tonight, and anyone who watches this, these videos. As I said earlier, I'm running for library board because the public library is for everyone. And I believe really deeply in that fundamentally democratic mission. I see serving as a library trustee as an opportunity to support this essential civic institution. The AADL, I don't know that we said this specifically, the AADL is one of the best libraries in the country. It is routinely recognized as one of the best public libraries in the country. And I want to help it maintain that level of excellence, support our staff as they serve our community with the creativity and care that they've demonstrated, especially through this pandemic, but even well before. I have used the AADL's resources in many different ways. I've used them as a student, as a parent, as a community organizer, and as a reader. And I just hope that I will have the opportunity to serve the library and to give back to this institution that has really given me so much and that gives our community so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Foley.
In my travels throughout the United States, I've always thought of one thing as indicator as to the type of community that I'm visiting is I look at the public library as a lens into the community. And one thing I can categorically say, I am proud if anybody else comes and looks at Ann Arbor through the lens of our public library and the quality that we have. I am just extraordinarily proud to be part of this community and would love to serve on this community or on this board to continue to support the excellence that is the Ann Arbor District Library. I think Director Parker and her team is outstanding. As I said, I have worked with many hundreds of public libraries across the country. And to reiterate what was said earlier, this is one of the top 10 public libraries that I've encountered, and it would be an honor to be part of it. That said, I think regardless if I'm elected or not, I think it is in wonderful hands, and I say thank you to both the League and all of the other candidates.
Thank you. And I want to thank all of you for participating in this really valuable forum this evening. And I'm going to turn it over now to Linda for some closing comments on behalf of the League of Women Voters. Thank you very much.
The League thanks the candidates for participating in tonight's forum and those who contributed questions. All our candidate forums will be available for streaming on your computer or smartphone. Go to our website, lwvannarbor.org, and look for the link to the programs. In addition, the forums can be viewed on the Community Television Network. Please urge your friends and neighbors to watch these forums too. For additional nonpartisan information on candidates and ballot issues, go to vote411.org, the League's voter resource guide covering local, state, and federal candidates and current proposals that will appear on your ballot. As a reminder, all registered voters may cast an absentee ballot. With the challenges that have been created by COVID-19 and confusion regarding registration and voting procedures, the League encourages you to vote as soon as possible after you feel knowledgeable about the candidates and the ballot issues. The most important thing is to make sure that you vote in the November 3rd general election. Thank you for watching. Good night.